So what is up guys, it's Smowtown here, and today I just wanted to chat to you informally about some shower thoughts I've been having about the lore of Warframe and why I think it's really in a good place and it's got me excited for the future. Ever since the Deadlock Protocol and hell some of the elements introduced in Fortuna back a while ago, a number of different story webs have emerged and a lot of serious world building has taken place, meaning that DE is poised to take this story in really interesting directions. Before we go any further, if you like Warframe and you like Warframe lore, consider subscribing to the channel as I do Warframe lore, usually in a more formal and cinematic approach than this casual chat right here, such as the in-depth Grineer lore video I just did, which is a 40-minute real in-depth look at the history of the Grineer, and I'll leave a link for that below. But with that out of the way, let us get on with the main discussion today. So first things first, I'd like to look at the structure of the last two story updates and the way in which they have impacted the background lore for Warframe, those updates being the Deadlock Protocol and the Call of the Tempestarii. So as epic as the new war story is, and how much potential it has for big battles and big epic moments and stuff featuring the Lotus, what it lacks is potential for sustainable future content and more background lore. So what do I mean by this? Well, ultimately, as epic as the new war story is, it's ultimately a story that has to have a conclusive end, and gotta have one soon, to be honest. It can't drag on, and it has to reach a complete conclusion for the fact that it's built up some sense of urgency, some real high drama, high stakes. And if it is to remain believable, and if these stakes are to remain believable, it must end conclusively, and it must end soon. The Sentients are such a danger, and the rivalry between them and the Tenno is so intense and so genocidal, potentially, that it cannot drag on for the sake of these high stakes. For example, if the Sentients just keep invading and they keep just getting pushed back and they keep doing ineffectual challenges to our power, then eventually they'll just become a joke, and the impact of the Sentients and everything that's been building up for the past few years will essentially be null and void, and that would be a big shame given the fact that it involves the Lotus, and we're all excited to see that conclude. I think DE recognises this, so in tandem they've started to generate some new stories and build up some nice world building, and we saw this in the beginning of the Deadlock Protocol. So the Deadlock Protocol is essentially a storyline that has seen the reformation of the Corpus, not just the updating of their tilesets, but the revamp and the defining of their lore. Now, in general, the Corpus has had always a lot of lore and some really interesting characters like Vala and Nathaniel, but in general their kind of background and culture and ideals has generally just been, their mercantile and their greedy, their greedy corporation with high tech. But beyond that, there's not a huge amount of, lot of lore beneath the surface, but that has been changed dramatically with the Deadlock Protocol, in my opinion. With the advent of Parvis Granum, the Corpus feels like something new, something more distinct, and something a bit more dangerous. Another thing it does well, and something that the Call of the Tempestarii builds upon, is that it has refined the fact that the Corpus have a bit of culture, have ideals, and have a sense of history. So this lore introduced in Deadlock Protocol was really foundational, and I enjoy the bits of flavour that it's now brought into the game. For example, the captains of Corpus vessels that you see when you enter Corpus regions that, they address you, they shout things like, "This is Granum space." And that's just a tiny little bit of flavour, and it's something more serious and definitive before. And even those little lines define that, these are people with beliefs and ideals, and they're a bit more of a threat and serious kind of than the more generic Corpus that we saw before. The language and ideals espoused by Parvos and his followers are also very clear, very ideological. They shun the idle, and they exemplify the hard-working man who's prepared to roll up his sleeves to earn his credit. Again, the lines that are espoused by the treasurers, they say things like, "Your crowns will remain free from the grasp of the idol," or something along those lines. Now, these are just really nice bits of flavour that, the Deadlock Protocol brought with it, not just the storyline and not just the updated tile, but just little bits of dialogue, little bits of flavour of the Corpus culture that we see in the treasurers and the Corpus captains, which, I really appreciate personally. At this point, I'd like to revisit Fortuna, because retrospectively, Fortuna now acts as a really nice foil to the rest of the Deadlock Protocol and the Parvis Granum side of the Corpus. So the Orb Valis is essentially Nathaniel's operation, and he represents the other side of Corpus that are now very, very distinct from the new Parvis Granum side of the Corpus, and it makes that bickering Corpus board that we've always had hints of, and we've always had the fact that they're ununified for various generic reasons. But now we've got this clear definition between two different sides of the Corpus. So Fortuna is a great way to see that other side of the Corpus and what they stand for and what the other side of the Corpus stands for. So Nathaniel represents a kind of fat cat preacher, kind of madman. He's very bombastic. He's quite funny in a lot of ways. He's not the character doesn't take himself as seriously as Parvis Granum's, more down-to-earth, pragmatic side of the Corpus. Nathaniel's the more kind of bombastic, silly, self-satisfied, smug, soft side of the Corpus, if you will. That's not to say that Nathaniel wasn't a threat. Of course, he's brutalised the people of Solaris, the Deck 12 disaster and all that things like that. So he has got some serious lore, don't get me wrong, but the way in which he's presented is a lot less serious and a lot less gravity to it than the Parvis Granum side. However, the actions of his in Fortuna now act as a good comparison as to what Parvis Granum doesn't stand for and what his followers do not stand for, and we'll start to see that split in the Corpus, and we've got that defined break between two sides of the Corpus, which we've always heard hints of but never really had any details about. So again, just with the Deadlock Protocol, we've had that bit of lore refined, and I really appreciate that. So the Deadlock Protocol is essentially just a small quest, but it does ultimately revamp the entire Corpus and bring some different ideas to the Corpus, which I think they've desperately needed. And it set this nice kind of foundation for new characters, new adventures, and in general, new effects that can happen in the Warframe story thanks to the fact that the Corpus have a bit more agency about them and a bit more direction. So this is fulfilled, first of all, in the Call of the Tempestarii. This is the first kind of proof that we've had that this Deadlock Protocol was a foundation for new stories. So aside from the amazing tune, do you know what else is amazing about the newest quest? Is that it is not in a rush to carry on any of the main storylines, but it takes a step back, takes a step to the side, and does its own quest, its own adventure story, set in this new Parvis era world of Warframe. It's essentially an adventure story, but it's an adventure story that helps build the war and do some more foundational lore work that we needed, and it allows us to build new characters and new potential for the future. I'm not saying that it won't help lead into some of the new lore, which it definitely will, given that we've got the Sisters of Granum that are coming, and that is obviously right at the end of the Call of the Tempestarii. It leads into that. But the whole tale of the Call of the Tempestarii is essentially its own tale, set within this new setting of lore, and it helps build upon that lore that we had in the Deadlock Protocol. So as I discussed in prior videos, my Vala video and my analysis of the lyrics of the Sleeping in the Cold Below song, which I highly recommend you check out as I do go into a lot of detail. But ultimately what I said in those videos is that this quest helps build up Corpus culture once again. So for example, the very nature of having a song like Sleeping in the Cold Below implies this Corpus naval culture, like the Golden Age of Piracy culture, kind of that naval era culture that we didn't have before with the Corpus. Again, they were just kind of generic mercantile people. Whereas now we have this idea that on each Corpus vessel there's a good bit of camaraderie, a nice bit of crew naval culture where they sing songs together and they have this kind of naval swashbuckling culture, and it's really, really nice to get that. We get more of that through Vala's characterization. She's devastated, broken almost, over the loss of her sisters, her comrades, her former crewmates. And this shows the close bond that she and possibly other crews have had with one another. And it's starting to develop the idea that the people that we face in Warframe aren't just faceless, numbers that we just go around, slicing through them. Each Corpus that we kill is a person. They're part of a crew. And that idea is starting to be slowly built through this new lore that, they're part of a crew, they're part of, this ship, this culture, that they're not necessarily bad people, that they're just, playing a part in their culture. And that can only be a good thing if you start to sympathise or empathise at least. Additionally, the song itself suggests things about other bits of culture, about Corpus culture, such as their burial practices. There's a line in the song, and again I look at this in more detail in my lyrics analysis video, but it says something along the lines of "lay me down under Granum crowns," which is Vala talking about her burial rites, what she'd like when she is sleeping in the cold below, i.e. dead. And she says, lay me down, bury me under Corpus crowns. So this makes me think, of other cultures where you're buried with your valuables so you can take them to the afterlife, or Homeric culture where warriors had coins placed in their eyes. However, it suggests in Corpus culture that Granum crowns are these valuable things to the Corpus, especially the followers of Granum. And when she's dead, as long as she's buried under Granum crowns, that's her funeral rites achieved, and she'll be able to rest in peace. It's nice just getting these ideas of Corpus culture. It just makes them a little bit more rich, and that we're starting to get the idea that they are their own people. They're not just greedy mercantiles or a business, they are a people. Finally, Vala herself, in my opinion, is an incredible character. I've done lots, not lots, but I've done a decent amount on her in my videos that I've done, and she's an example of what we can expect in Parvis era Warframe, and it's something that gets me very excited. So we mainly faced godlike kind of enemies They're generally the main enemies that we fight in the game. You know, very inhuman characters. You know, we've got, you know, the Sentients, and we've got Hunhao, we've got Nata. We fought the Orokin twins, you know, the twin queens of the Grineer. So very high level people. Whereas Vala is just, you know, a down to earth. You know, she's just a human. She's just an ordinary human. But she holds us to task and she takes the Tenno head on. She's, you know, very pragmatic, down to earth, vengeful, full of emotion. She's been through a lot, and, you know, she's almost sympathetic to a degree. You know, we can understand that she is very upset about what's happened to her crewmates, to put it lightly, very upset, and very disturbed. But, you know, that passion drives her to take on the Tenno, who, in essence, are power levels above, you know, a mere human captain. Yet she does pose a serious, you know, serious threat. A regular human, you know, holding us to task and posing a difficult enemy is something that's really interesting to me. She also represents that new side of the Corpus that I mentioned, the more pragmatic, the less kind of embellished, you know, almost bombastic side that Nathaniel represents. You know, Nathaniel's dressed as a Void Key. You know, he's very extra, you could say. Whereas Vala's dressed, you know, she's very Corpus. Obviously, she's got the tattoos on her face, which is, you know, that Corpus kind of look. But ultimately, she's dressed very plainly. She's, you know, in a pragmatic kind of military naval jumpsuit. She's got her hair tied back, admittedly with grav technology, but she, you know, it's just hair pulled back pragmatically in a ponytail, and she's just dressed like a naval soldier, nothing else, no embellishments like the Nathaniel's ridiculous tickers on his head, and like I said, dressed like a void key. So she's very pragmatic, down to earth, and very normal. And the fact she's able to challenge us and hold our attention for a whole quest is very exciting, and it says a lot about Parvis Granum's followers and the Corpus in general, that, you know, they have these extraordinary individuals who are very normal and very sympathetic, and I very like that. And I'll stop ranting about Vala now. I think I made it very clear that I think she's a great character. At this point, I'd like to give a shout out to my boy Cephalon Cy. You know, he's the best Cephalon, we all know that. But he actually gets a lot of really great character development here as well, and it shows how well DE, like her using limited lines of dialogue to just seed little bits of character development. There's not a huge amount of dialogue with Cephalon Cy in the quest. Indeed, there's not a huge amount of dialogue at all in the quest. But Cephalon Cy, after you've hacked the ship, the Corpus ship, and you learn about the Tempestarii, and you understand the fact that they are a lost Orcaneer ship that are just trying to finish their mission. They're essentially lost in time, and they've lost their mission, and they have no purpose. Cephalon Cy says something along the lines of, like, their mission is like having lost a crew, and so he likens the trauma and the issues of the Tempestarii and Sevagoth to his trauma, which is, of course, that he lost his original crew by having to follow his mission protocols during the Old War when he was on a railjack with his crew, and it's something he's never really got over. We know that from the Rising Tides quest, and the fact that he brings this up again and he sympathises with the Tempestarii and their plight is really something special, and it's why he gets so involved in this quest. And you see that from the passion and the magic that he puts into the final sign-off and the final log for the Tempestarii when you go to the Void and you rescue Sevagoth. You know, he signs it off almost with pride and a lot of emotion. So one can hope that he got a little bit of closure from this quest, and it's really amazing that Cephalon Cy, with a couple of lines, has got a lot of character development, and it shows that and it really is a good example of, you know, the exemplary writing that we saw in the Call of the Tempestarii, that it was a very short quest, but we got some excellent world building and some excellent character development. So I'd like to see more of Cephalon Cy. I think he's a great character, great companion, and it shows how well DE's writing is now, that they can develop a character essentially who's just like a redone of Ordis, who, you know, Ordis does his part in the story, but he's not an amazingly developed character by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but just by a little bit different writing when they redo the Cephalon story with Cephalon Cy, who's essentially your other Ordis for the Railjack, and he's far more compelling, in my opinion, not just because his voice actor is, you know, exceptional, but also because just the way he's written and the way he fit into the story was really emotional and really, really important to me. So, in summary, why am I excited for the future? So, the Deadlock Protocol refreshed the Corpus, and they were in need of that, in my opinion. They've made them far more defined. They've got an interesting culture. They've got interesting characters. There's a lot of potential for the future. Parvis Granum is an extremely intelligent character, and not only that, but he sets up a foil for the other traditional sides of the Corpus that we've seen in Nathaniel. So Nathaniel can maybe stop being this bombastic, funny character that he's been, which is, you know, it's fine. but we can see some real tension maybe evolving in the Corpus, which we've always heard of because we've seen it in lore that the Corpus bickers. We've just been told that, but now we can see it happen, and that's very exciting to me. Maybe we could start to take sides like the previous events, and we can take sides between Nathaniel and Parvis Granum. There's also the potential, obviously, for more characters like Vala. The Parvis Granum side of the Corpus are very serious, very pragmatic. They would take they considered taking the Tenno on as part of his board. I don't know if he jokingly said that, but it shows how pragmatic he is, that he's willing to roll his sleeves up and do whatever it takes to get ahead. And likewise, it seems his followers are like that. We saw how pragmatic Vala Galarius was, and how she essentially just took on a Tenno and 2 Railjacks during this quest with a single ship with no fear. It's incredible, really. So I'm excited for the future. I think there's some incredible foundational work being done, and now we have a lot of potential moving forward with the story. I want the new war to end as well. I'd love, I can't wait to see what happens with the tab, but I think that if they hadn't done this foundational work, there would be a bit of a story void, and I think DE saw that, and that's why instead of finishing off the new war, they have instead developed these new characters in tandem. So once the new war ends, it's not just over. We can't just say, well, that's it. We've still got Parvis Granum's plans, and he represents a real danger. Also, how the Grineer are going to react to this new kind of directed, aggressive, pragmatic Corpus. I don't think they'll take kindly to the way in which that Parvis Granum will be directing his forces, and likewise I don't think Parvis Granum will let the Grineer bully them militarily. So it'll be interesting to see how these things play out. I think we're in a really great position to see what happens after the new war once that finishes up. The Sentient's been defeated is by no means, in my opinion, the end of the story, to be honest. I like the Sentient story, but I'm far more interested in the Corpus and in the Grineer, in my opinion. So we're in a great position, guys, and I'm really excited for the future of Warframe lore. I hope you guys are too. But if you liked this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, obviously feel free to leave a dislike. Leave your comments below what you think about the story and where it's heading. But until next time, guys, I hope you have a pleasant day. I have to get back on to grind out some ducats, to be able to trade with Barrow, because there's a lot of stuff I need. So take care, and I will see you in the cold below. Bye bye.